page we left off on is titled Sensory Language. Everybody see that? The real fun thing about this is it allows you to listen to the way a person talks to cue into how they see the world. Because we all know about learning styles, right? Right. Different ways of learning. Some people are primarily visual, some people are primarily auditory, some people are primarily kinesthetic, like my dad. Works with his hands, everything's about his body. I'm primarily auditory. I need to hear it or I don't get it. If you try and show me PowerPoint pictures, graphs, I'll be scratching my head the whole time. And with a bald head, it starts to callous, so I don't want to do that. It has to be auditory for me, which is why I talk so much. But if you want to learn how somebody else learns, how they see the world, so you can connect with them even more effectively, you need to listen to the words they use. Some of the most common disconnects in a classroom setting is a disconnect between learning style. Where if someone says, I don't understand this, can you explain it to me? And the teacher says, sure, let me show you. And then they begin to write something up on the board. Where is the disconnect in that moment? The request was, can you explain it to me? That's a request for auditory information. And the teacher says, let me show you. That's visual. I can't tell you how many kids I've worked with over the years that says, the teacher doesn't help me. The teacher never helps me. Then I go to the teacher. Well, can you explain this? Every time he raises his hand, I go over there. I do this. I'm giving him all the help I can. I don't know what he's talking about. So what the child is essentially saying is, the way you're helping me is not effective. It doesn't help. It's not that you aren't going through the motions. It's not that you aren't making an effort. It's that you are not effective. So when we get more into the child's learning style, we find out where the disconnect is. Maybe a child needs to get up and move and walk around and think about it, because being very kinesthetic and using their body helps organize their thinking. They need to move to think about it. Sometimes pacing helps. Anybody have a kid that paces or likes to fidget or chew on something while they're thinking? That's part of their strategy. That's part of how they organize to think straight. You deny them that because it's not appropriate, and you are basically setting the child up for failure. So you look at this wonderful little cheat sheet I gave you. You look at all the different words that a person can possibly use to cue you in to how they are thinking about that experience in that moment. So you ask them, so, you went on a date, huh? What was it like? Well, I felt like we really clicked. That's auditory. Or if someone says, well, she was nice, but something just didn't sit well with me. That's kinesthetic. When you look at those words down there, can you think of a time when you talk like that, or can you think of anybody else around you that uses a lot of this language? I can see some nods. What about this looks familiar to you? For those of you who aren't looking at the page. See, clearly for me, you're going to hear a lot of auditory, but keep in mind, it's not going to be strict because we use all of our senses. There's going to be some situations where you have a combination. Somebody might say, well, it looked like it was going to work out. But after a while, something about it, just didn't feel right. Or someone wants to talk to you and say, I really want to discuss something with you. It's really important for me to explain to you how this is going to work, and I really need you to listen. If you said it to somebody who's highly visual, you might lose them. Because you want to deliver them something purely auditory. Now, one thing that's unique, there's a unique learning style on there that you'll see called digital logical. That's someone who tends to really dispense with sensory and go pure logic. You'll find a lot of people on the spectrum that are pure logic, information people. So they won't say to you, you know, I really need you to look at this from my perspective. That's visual. I need you to look at it and see it this way. I want you to imagine. Or they won't say, you know what, I really need you to hear what I'm saying because it doesn't feel like it to me that you're listening to me. They won't talk like that. They'll say, we need to have a discussion about a topic of utmost importance. It's important that we consider this, that we reflect at length, and when we've collected adequate data, we will sit down again and review the information at hand and make the necessary decisions. Those are the information seekers. So if you say to them, well, can you show me how we're going to do that? Well, there are a variety of ways that we can consider this data. That's one potential modality. I'll give it some due consideration, and I'll report back to you at my earliest convenience. So when you hear people talk, it's really important to have this as a point of reference. Because if you want to connect with them, if you want to teach them, if you want to learn from them, you need to know how they see and filter the world. So this is important to review, to go back and just start listening to people. Listen to yourselves. Because we talked earlier about sensory filtering, how we take in information throughout the world, how we make sense of it. One of the biggest clues into somebody else's world is the language they use.